You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and I am joined on the podcast this week by two of the latest stars of Dorney Park's TikTok account. First, let me introduce to the podcast, for the first time in a while, all the way from Ohio, Kyle Lindner. Kyle, how's it going?
Hey, Andrew. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. And then also another budding TikTok star on the Dorney Park account, but also our personal account at Coaster101, John Stevenson in Tennessee. John, how are you?
I'm doing good. I tell you, it has been crazy getting stopped by people in the grocery store asking, like, hey, aren't you that guy from the Dorney Park TikTok? I mean, it's been a very fast-paced couple of weeks since we were at the park.
This is absolutely true, but the good news is, even though it has been a couple of weeks since your most recent visit to the park, this week on the podcast, we are going to be talking Dorney Park a little bit. And for those who are unaware, Dorney Park is a park in Allentown, Pennsylvania that dates back to the 1860s, 1870s, somewhere around that timeline. And you know, it's got almost 140-year history, and that number's probably off. I'm reading from an old trip report that I wrote, but they were purchased by Cedar Fair in 1992. Was the first park that Cedar Fair purchased post merger with Cedar Point and Valley Fair, so that was kind of the third ever Cedar Fair park. But I'll go ahead and I'll start with you guys, and Kyle, I'll let you jump in first, but had you ever been to Dorney Park, and kind of what were your first impressions on your visit?
Yeah, no, I have never been to Dorney Park. It was always one of those that was just out of reach, like on my trips to Hershey Park, or even coming up from the south to Kings Dominion and Six Flags America. So I never got there, and it was always one of those parks that I wanted to go to because they had some very unique roller coasters that I'd always seen in TV or books or something growing up. So it was definitely on my to-do list. So I was really excited to get there. First impressions was just like how intimate the whole thing was. It's not like a lot of other Cedar Fair parks that it's like you get there and it's this daunting thing you have to tackle in a day. And really, we only had 3 hours before some big storms came in. So it was nice to actually approach this park and be able to tackle it in a few hours.
Nice. And John, what about you? I think you're a first-time visitor as well, yeah?
Yeah, this was my first time as well. I had made a trip to Pennsylvania a few years ago and unfortunately didn't make it to that side of the state. So it's been on my coaster bucket list, park bucket list for quite some time. I followed the construction of Hydra really closely when it was being built in 2004, and was just really fascinated with the layout. And then through that, I started kind of exploring more of the park. And like Kyle, I had seen some of the coasters on TV shows and in books, and it was one of those parks. It may not be packed with record-breaking coasters or the most coasters, but it was always, especially with its history, a park that really intrigued me. And then, like Kyle said, we were really on a fast timeline because the day was supposed to be a washout, and thankfully really held off for quite some time. And I think that kept the crowds low. And so we were able to get on just about everything within a 3-hour period. So very manageable park, good selection of rides. It was just overall, it was a really, really enjoyable day.
Nice. Yeah. And I had visited the park back in 2016. I was on kind of a Northeast road trip from North Carolina, and I did Dorney Park, Six Flags Great Adventure, and Six Flags America in the same trip. So we'll link those in the show notes. It's significantly dated at this point, but I do remember kind of what Kyle said. I remember that definite intimate feeling, intimate, not intimate. But it definitely had a charm that I feel like you don't see in a lot of corporate owned parks. I think that's the best way to put it. But you guys both kind of touched on the unique coaster lineup, and as of this recording, Dorney Park has 7 roller coaster credits. And although there hasn't been a truly new roller coaster at Dorney Park since 2005, which is it's the same age as Coaster101 at this point. But what did you guys think of the roller coaster lineup at Dorney Park, and kind of from top to bottom, did you have a favorite? And John, we'll start with you this time.
I think for me, the favorite, it was definitely a tie between Hydra and Talon. Both of them were especially Hydra was such a unconventional B&M, especially for a floorless. It really, from start to finish, everything about it is fairly unique, starting with the JoJo roll, the oddly shaped Cobra roll, the airtime hills. It's just nothing about it is standard, and I think that's why I really liked it. And then Talon is the pacing of the coaster is really caught me off guard for its size. It's not the largest, but it just really held its momentum throughout the course of the coaster. And so both of those, I think, were the two high points for me.
So my favorite was Steel Force. It was for how old it is, and just like it was so smooth, had so many good airtime moments, especially coming back. You go out and do a big airtime hill, do a helix, which, on paper and like on Google Maps, you can't really tell how intense that helix is going to be, but it was quite intense. And then coming back, you go into like 5 or 6 airtime hills that are all just amazing. So that was definitely my favorite at the park. Second would be Hydra as well. It's just like such a unique ride that you have all these like floorless B&Ms out there that are almost the same, but this one's like very different, that you can tell that it's different. Like John mentioned, the JoJo roll at the beginning is incredible, just like this slow downhill turn. But then the rest of it, I guess when you're at Dorney Park, you don't realize how much of it is on a hill.
Mm-hmm.
And from pictures of Hydro, you wouldn't be able to tell. But like that JoJo roll goes downhill to begin the ride. And then it's kind of the whole thing set on top of a hill. So like you go clear down one side and then back up and then down the other side. And the scenery is really cool. It's right there next to Steel Force, so you get some good views as well.
Okay. Yeah, I do remember loving Steel Force, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. Actually just passed in the last week or so. But those Morgan Hypers, if you get them in the right seat, I feel like you get a really, really good ride. And I know there's like a sweet spot. If you ask any enthusiast out there kind of what the sweet spot seat is, they'll all tell you a different answer. But there are opportunities to kind of have a really, really good ride on those. I also think Talon, highly, highly underrated when it comes to B&M inverts. And again, this is 6 years ago that I rode this, and so my memory is a little foggy, but I remember thinking Talon was really good. And I remember talking to, when I was at the park, it was he was general manager. He's recently been promoted, but Mike Fennell, who was at Carowinds, and so he had Afterburn Top Gun to compare it to, and he said, when I was talking to him, he goes, "Go ride Talon. Let me know what you think, and let me know how it compares to Afterburn." And both of those rides, I feel like, are very underrated when it comes to B&M inverts in terms of pacing and elements and things like that. I think, when I was there, I didn't ride the Woodstock Express family kitty credit. Did you guys get on that? I know we. It's the Coaster101 podcast, and even though Zamperla doesn't say, pay us, we're obligated to say nice things. But did you guys get on the kitty credit there?
You know us, Andrew, and we are kitty coaster nerds. And whenever there's a chance, we will ride a kitty coaster. So we totally did.
Okay.
Yes.
What do we have any thoughts, or are we going to, save those for the Patreon that we don't have?
I will say it had the best head choppers of any kitty coaster I've been on.
Well, Kyle, you're also like 6'6" or something like that.
Not
so, Okay. Well,
It was they had a lot of trees close by, so that was cool.
gotcha.
Yeah, I did like that. Yeah.
Okay. And what about Thunderhawk, the park's lone wooden coaster that is, it's coming up on 100 years in the next couple of years here. What were our thoughts on Thunderhawk?
Yeah, Thunderhawk was kind of a surprise hit for me. I knew it's the park's only wooden coaster, and I honestly did not realize how old it was and that it's coming up on its 100th birthday in 2024. Really interesting layout. Very, again, kind of going back to Hydra, a little unconventional, and had some strange transitions and banking. And I was like, this is somewhat mildly reminiscent of an RMC transition or like a banked turn that, maybe the forefathers of RMC may have designed. So really enjoyed it. I mean, it had a decent amount of air. I like the color. It was kind of colored, the color of it, I guess, to make it look like new wood. I don't know. It was it was a really fun ride. I enjoyed it.
Kyle, what about you?
I agree with everything John said. We kind of talked while we were at the park that we didn't realize how old Dorney Park was. I don't know if it's just the fact that it's a Cedar Fair park that you just have in your head that, oh, this is, a 30, 40-year-old park that, Cedar Fair has poured into over the years, but it's really not. And this park has a lot of history before it was corporately owned, which includes Thunderhawk. And I guess like when Thunderhawk was built, it was originally an out and back. And like within just a few years of it being built, they kind of took that out and then added a turnaround section into the middle, and almost this like half out back, half twister, like style layout. And it changed it from being just like a normal wooden coaster to making it its own thing. And I agree with what John said. It was really cool. I know we both got off of it and we're like, wow, that was not what we were expecting, and in a good way. It had a lot of air, had a lot of like random jolts to the left or the right, and some really cool almost outer bank turns. So yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, and you mentioned the history of Dorney Park, and I gotta throw a plug to recent podcast guest Arthur Levine with his Substack newsletter. Last week, I believe it was, he sent out an email kind of about the history of trolley parks, and there's only a handful of like what were known as trolley parks still in existence today. Dorney Park, obviously, being one of those, which again dating back to the 1860s, 1870s. That's how you got to some of these places. They were at the end of a trolley line where people could go and enjoy themselves for the day, and obviously not on the thrills, the more modern thrills like Talon and Hydra, but definitely, like I said, Thunderhawk has been there since the 20s, and come 2024 will be 100 years old. So it's as wooden coasters continue to kind of age and more wooden coasters are decommissioned, it is nice that Dorney Park still has this coaster classic, and they're definitely keeping it up to date and with new paint and putting money and effort and time into it. So it is really good to see, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. If you went there not knowing, you would never know that this coaster was 100 years old. They keep it like immaculate. It's so smooth, and like John said, the paint is new and everything looks really good on it.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't look a day over 98. So
no.
It's on the subject of other coaster-like attractions, not necessarily roller coasters, we got to talk Demon Drop. And we, you guys, whoever posted the video on our TikTok of Demon Drop with the very descriptive, would you ride this? Shout out to you guys, because that did a lot of really good views. But did you guys get on Demon Drop? Did you ride it?
We did. So Demon Drop has been another one of those things on my to-do list since I was a little kid, because everyone knows it used to be at Cedar Point. So I have memories of going there and being too short to ride, probably happily too short to ride at that point. So I remember my parents getting on it and just like not knowing what just hit them. So it was always like one of those that I was happy I was too small to ride, but then later I was like, you know what, this would be really cool to ride before it's gone forever. So, kind of forgetting that it was at Dorney, getting there and having that as a cool surprise was awesome. But it's such a weird ride, like unlike anything I've ever been on before.
Yeah, it's not every day you're strapped into a steel cage and
No.
elevator lift, and then you kind of free fall on a roller coaster track, and then it's like, whoop, we're gonna go feet first at the bottom, and then we're gonna put you in reverse.
Yeah.
It's wild. I remember, especially on that transition from when you go to flat towards like back to the station. I remember that transition being pretty jarring and jolting. I think would be the best words I could use to describe it. But John, what was your demon drop experience like?
I was just so, I guess, in just like what is happening right now the entire time. It was my first Intamin first gen drop tower. And I was just thinking, I was trying to get back in that headspace of like, okay, what was this like on opening day when it originally opened at Cedar Point? I just, because even back then, I mean, obviously there was nothing like it. And it was just so weird. It was unlike anything that I've been on. And yeah, it was a little jolty, and the transitions maybe weren't the smoothest, but with so few of those left in operation, it was really cool to finally be on one. Wasn't racing back to get in line, but I'm definitely glad that I was able to ride it.
Okay. So, back when it opened originally at Cedar Point, there were enthusiasts. They were like, well, is this a coaster credit? I don't know. So I'm glad we're still holding that logic up to, 2022 standards.
Right.
Were there any other rides at the park that kind of stood out to you guys? I know as coaster enthusiasts, you were probably there mostly for coasters, but I feel like Dorney Park has a pretty decent collection of, those classic flat rides. Like they've got a whip that was from 1920 and a bunch of other, their carousels from 1921 that opened in the park in 1995. But were there any other rides that kind of stood out to you guys as standouts during your visit? John, you're nodding.
Yes.
I'll go with you.
Yes. So one of the standout non-coaster attractions for me at Dorney Park was Zephyr, which was one of the strangest. And I'm a part-time train enthusiast on the side my side hustle to my side hustle. So I knew that the Zephyr train at the park, which I did not find out until later in the day, that there's actually a more traditional train ride at Dorney Park. It was not open. Unfortunately, but Zephyr is a replica of this old school actual train locomotive. So I knew what it was. I knew it was modeled after, but it was still so interesting seeing a miniature version of that just kind of meandering through Dorney Park. And when we actually went and were able to take a ride inside, is a little cramped, probably. Especially for you, Kyle. And it was just so strange. I mean, I liked it. It had a very scenic course, and it was just by far the most unique train ride I've ever taken in an amusement park.
I love it. Kyle, what about you? Any other rides that were standouts for you?
Unfortunately, the Zephyr was the only non-roller coaster other than Demon Drop that I got on, because I had a very long drive home and the rain hit early. So I will have to second what John said about the Zephyr. It was the strangest park train that I've ever been on, but it was just like so cool to be like almost on like a model railroad type feel. And we were definitely squished into that car, but it was really fun. The tiny little windows, and they lock you in. It's very strange, but we got some cool video.
Nice.
And, I was bummed I didn't get on the whip, because that's one of my favorite old school flat rides, and I love the one at Kennywood. And yes. They got a smaller one up near me at Camden Park, which is an original too. So it would have been cool to get on that, but next time.
It's all good. That's why we are in this hobby, so we can go to the same parks dozens and dozens of times in the future.
Of course.
Even though it's been years since my last Dorney Park visit, and I'm overdue for a trip back up to Allentown for sure, if for no other reason than to get that kiddie coaster credit that I'm missing. Because back in the day in 2016, I was like, well, I'll skip the kiddie coasters. And now as we all are racing towards 300 coaster credits, I was like, I really wish I had ridden that kiddie coaster. But I do want to talk the coasters at Dorney Park. And I know you talked to some enthusiasts while you're at the park. The thing with Dorney, and this is to me a fairly unique situation. The newest ground up coaster at that park, as we mentioned, was Hydra the Revenge, which opened in 2005. And since then, the park has opened 2 other roller coasters. They were transplants from other parks, but you had Possessed, which was Steel Venom at Geauga Lake. That opened in 2008. But you also had Stinger, which came from California's Great America. It was known as Invertigo, opened in 2012 and then closed shortly thereafter in 2017. What do you guys think about, what is it about Dorney Park where, is it the market that it's in? Is it the target audience where the park, again, it's a Cedar Fair park. You would think, given Cedar Fair's recent track record, that they would be adding another coaster at least every 5 to 10 years. We're not talking every year here. But what do you guys think it is about Dorney Park where they're not constantly adding coasters? I mean, it's kind of situated in between that Philadelphia and New York market. So I don't think it is a smaller park, but it's not necessarily a small market park. But you guys have any thoughts as to why you think personally, I mean, not necessarily what the park's actual reasoning is, but your personal thoughts as to why Dorney is not getting coasters more often than 17 years in between coasters?
Yeah, I think, I don't know. It's always interesting to me, the parks, both Cedar Fair, other chains, Six Flags, that you have parks that kind of, what comes to mind is Six Flags St. Louis, that kind of exist, and, they may get new flat rides, they may get other, smaller investments, new water park attractions, but they still don't get those, any headliner roller coasters. They go through these decade plus spans of no major attractions. And it's always interesting growing up. I grew up not too far from Six Flags St. Louis, and it's not the busiest park. And I know that, they have had some attractions, but it's strange just talking to people. That's not something I hear, that we haven't gotten a new roller coaster in X number of years. So it may be something that they know the market better than a bunch of guys on a podcast do, probably. And so they may be able to determine that they can, go at this pace and not make any major investments into roller coasters and still do good business. But it is interesting because, I mean, within 60, 70 miles, you have 2 major parks, Hershey Park and Great Adventure. And so the competition is definitely there. People who live in this area have a lot of options. So just within a 100-mile drive, I'm looking at the number of coasters that are operating within 100 miles. And I mean, you've got a ton. So the competition is there. And I think I think it probably comes down to the market, that they're able to, do good business without having to spend capital.
Yeah. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page right now, and if this is to be correct, the only attraction that is opened at the park, and I know we're coming out of a pandemic and it's one of those parks, but they had 2 flat rides, bumper cars and a Hush Troika open in 2017. The only attraction that has opened at the park since then was the water play area at Wild Water Kingdom. And I'm trying to remember the name of that right now, and I can't find it. But it was, here it is. It was Seaside Splashworks. So that's really the major capital investment of that park in the last 5 years. Is a water play area that you can find at, half a dozen other Cedar Fair parks. I know it's almost an exact replica of the one at Carowinds that goes by the same name. But Kyle, do you have any other thoughts as to why Dorney might be a little bit neglected in the coaster category.
Yeah, I think John hit on a lot of good points there. Another thing to keep in mind is like just the location of that park and the layout that it currently has, because you walk in and the entire right side is water park, and if you walk straight back you have Hydra and Talon and a big hillside that's all blocked. It's almost like a dead end, and then you hang a left and it's a little loop down there down towards Thunderhawk and Steel Force and the Kitty area. So really the only spot where they could potentially build out their park is down past Possessed. And you can kind of see there's like a random, I think it's a Flying Eagles type ride that sits like 200 yards from the midway, and that's like the only thing back there. So they have some room in one corner of the park, but other than that, it's really tough to find any real estate.
It's true. And that plot of land was where Stinger existed from 2012 to 2017. Right. I've got it up on Google Maps right here. And there's kind of a tree line. There's a picnic area back there, but I think there's, if you're to move those flying scooters, move the picnic area or this catering pavilion or whatever happens to be back here, to me, and this is coming from the amateur armchair architect of the Coaster 101 podcast, you've got some good room for expansion there. So I will ask you guys, and let's put your engineering hats on, but we're not going to say no, build a Aquatrax Giga RMC inverted coaster. Like let's put our intelligent thinking hats on here. What is a type of coaster that you think could, complement the Dorney Park lineup that you could kind of fit in that space, kind of tucked back behind the Revolution and where the flying scooters are, and kind of in that Steel Force area? The left side of the park really is kind of how I'm going to describe this. And if you've got if you're pulling up Google Maps, it is literally in between Possessed and Steel Force. There are really two rides at Cedar Creek Flyers and Revolution. And then an assortment of other buildings, but we've proven that you can build around buildings. But what do you guys think would be the ideal coaster to kind of come back, to give Dorney Park a new ground up coaster?
So I would say it's really easy to, be like, oh, well, they need another wooden coaster, like a Mystic Timbers or something back there. And while that would be great and everything, I think they have a really good ride in Thunderhawk, and I'm not sure Mystic Timbers right beside it would, change up their lineup a whole lot. So then you're looking at something, relatively skinny that can go back through there, like a single rail RMC. Like personally, I'd like to see something like Lightning Run at Kentucky Kingdom. That's such an underrated ride and such a small footprint that a lot of parks could add those.
John, what about you?
This might be a little too lofty, but I would love something maybe like a slightly smaller Copperhead Strike. I think the park does need a launch coaster. I think that's one area. That's one area that they could have. They have an opportunity there to add something that they don't have already. Small wooden coaster, maybe. I know you don't want to detract from Thunderhawk. I was actually thinking single rail as well, an RMC Raptor. Yeah, definitely something a little bit more on the thrilling side, but I could also see kind of, something that was family friendly. I just think they need something. And also, I know this isn't a coaster, but I think one thing the park could really use is a dark ride. That was one thing I was really surprised to realize that they didn't have. I just assumed they had a Boo Blasters or something, one of those kind of standard interactive dark rides. So for whatever reason, a coaster wasn't in the cards. I think that would be a good backup.
I love it. Yeah, I think I'm going to answer my own question here. I think from the coaster standpoint, the two things to me that stand out would be a Gerstlauer Infinity coaster. Obviously, I know you've got the what is it? The one up at it's called Tantrum up there. One of the parks, kind of in the Northeast. I don't know exactly what it is. Canopy Lake, Conneaut Lake, not Conneaut Lake. maybe. Whatever it is. Again, all these Northeast parks, they kind of run together, even though I know it's New England Northeast. It's a whole big thing. I think, a Gerstlauer Infinity Coaster or a Eurofighter would look really good there. I think it would be a good spot, too, to kind of have maybe a bit of like a new proving ground coaster. I know we talked about Zamperla earlier, but I know they've got their new lightning trains and the Thunderbolt track, and Thunderbolt and Lightning, very, very frightening. Galileo, don't sue us. But, I think something like that to get people talking, even if it's a model that people have seen before. And I know there's a Thunderbolt at Coney Island, which again, this is in between the Philadelphia and New York markets. But I think, again, just something to get the enthusiasts, they're going to go to Hershey Park because Hershey Park, I feel like, is building new coasters every 3 or 4 years at this point, if not more frequently. And they're going to go to Six Flags Great Adventure, who's building coasters at the same frequency. And I think you need to get Dorney Park back on that. If enthusiasts are in that section of Pennsylvania, they'll go to Hershey, they'll go to Knoebels, they'll go to Six Flags. They might even go to American Dream if the coasters ever open there again. So I do think Dorney needs something. And yeah, I would agree. They do need a dark ride because I feel like every park needs a dark ride for sure. But yeah, that's kind of that would be my park wish list. But I do, before we wrap this up, I do want to talk a little bit about the both of yours newfound TikTok celebritydom appearing in the Dorney Park TikTok. And as someone who has appeared in a piece of Cedar Fair video content in the past, shout out to Chris Foshi at Worlds of Fun for the Things Roller Coaster Enthusiasts Say video. We'll link that in the show notes. But I want to know kind of how the whole interaction, I know it went down in the DMs on Twitter, Instagram, or something, but how did you guys get involved with the park, and how did they pitch you appearing in one of their TikTok videos?
Yeah, so we got Dorney Park slid into our DMs, and we connected with Avery, who works as a video content producer, and she was great. She took great care of us, and she just pitched this idea. There's a TikTok trend with this song. I know what, that really narrows it down. And kind of like if flashing or these transitions into different, you can tell I know absolutely nothing about video creation, but so it's kind of a take on that trend, and you'll have to go in the show notes and look at the video itself. But yeah, she pitched that, and we got to go around. We had met some fellow enthusiasts at the park, and they joined us, and we just went to the different coasters at the park and kind of took still shots at the entrance to those, and they put it together and made it look great.
And I think, as our fellow Coaster101 team member Nick put in the comments, looked like a bunch of regular normal dudes.
That was the nicest comp. That was the greatest compliment I've ever gotten in my entire life. So
It's true. I mean, John, as someone who's famously emotionless, I think this was a good step for you.
Yeah, the next time anyone calls me emotionless, I'm going to show them that TikTok and be like, yeah, what now, huh? So.
I'm TikTok famous. This has a dozen comments and a bunch of views. I don't even know at this point. Yeah. We'll link that video in the show notes. But Kyle, as someone who is, I will say, I love you. You're not the most up on social media.
That's a fair assessment. So
what was it like for you appearing in a TikTok video? Do you even know what TikTok is?
Unfortunately, I know what it is. I've never opened it. So I get the link from John and I can, watch it. But I had no idea how they're made.
Nice.
How to do it. So, Instagram's as far as I go. I get on Twitter once a month. But it was fun. I'm glad we got to interact with the park and, build that relationship, and that was really cool.
Nice. Okay. Perfect. Well, we're done talking about TikTok stardom. And like I said, we'll link that video. We'll link the video of me at Worlds of Fun too, so we can talk about who was better in their theme park acting roles. Anything else you guys want to talk about about Dorney Park before we put this podcast to bed?
I really was impressed by the park. Operations were good. Staff was friendly. Wish I could have stayed. Unfortunately, I didn't get to eat anything just because of the timing of the storms, but had some really good, looked like some good food options, and just the way that the park was laid out. I thought everything was well kept, well landscaped. It was just a really, really fun park. I'd recommend anyone who's in the area definitely check it out. Definitely a day, maybe half a day park if you're quick. So yeah, really, really enjoyed it. Was really, really impressed.
I will say I was very impressed with the quality of the roller coasters. You know, you go to a lot of parks where, you know, things are very rough, and there's a very few parks that you can go to ride every coaster and it's, you know, an enjoyable experience. And Dorney was one of those, especially with their major attractions. The proximity to other parks. I know John had mentioned how many roller coasters are in that area, but that's a huge plus. And throwing Dorney on as another day or two, really easy to do while you're on your road trip. I also didn't get to eat anything at the park, but my son, which also named Andrew, he says little Andrew and Mr. Andrew when he refers to you. But his favorite thing are candy apples or caramel apples or something. So I made sure to find their fudge shop at the end, which they dip their apples in the fudge and then, you know, the caramel and M&Ms in my case. But we got that home and devoured it that evening. So it was very good. I have to say that.
Good deal. Well, I appreciate the Mr. Andrew bit from your son. I do. Yeah. I love that. That is great. But yeah, if you've never been to Dorney Park, check out their website, dorneypark.com. They're on Twitter at Dorney Park PR and the other social medias. If you search Dorney Park, it'll come up. I don't know what their exact handles are, but if nothing else, we'll have a TikTok linked in our show notes, so go check that out. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster101 podcast. If you're unfamiliar, we have a website, coaster101.com. There's a lot of good stuff, some about Dorney Park, but about a lot of other news and other goings on in the amusement and coaster world. We're also on all of the social medias. We are at Coaster101, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the infamous TikTok. We're starting to blow up on TikTok, so if you want to jump on the train early, we're there as well at Coaster101. If you're listening, make sure you're liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing, telling your friends, telling your enemies, tricking your enemies into listening if you want to. But every listener we get helps us, build credibility, things like that. We love reading 5-star reviews on iTunes and Spotify, so keep those coming. And as always, thank you to Justin Mabry of JM Music Design for our theme music. Kyle, John, this was fun. Let's do it again soon.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right. See you guys. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.